With the Affordable Care Act, there will be a series of health exchanges established, state by state. Sometimes the states will be in charge of setting them up, sometimes the federal government will be in charge. It will be very interesting to see how this unfolds over the next couple of years, and it will be very important that we're observant to what is happening in the design of those exchanges and what does not happen. So some of the things that we're concerned about and focused upon is what level of choice will doctors and patients have in those exchanges in the selection of medications that would be available to them. So the legislation and the regulations that came out about the Affordable Care Act talked about how for each of the key drug classes there needs to be at least one drug available to patients. Well, for a lot of diseases, one drug just isn't enough. There needs to be choices because some patients respond to one drug, some patients respond to another, some have side effects from one. That's a floor, that's a minimum. Each of the states, however, will then determine what its benchmark plan is. And all of the available insurance plans in that exchange for each of the states would have to meet a certain benchmark. Now, some of those states, the number of choices will be very broad. And so most of the medications that are available today will be available to patients. However, other states have a much narrower group of medications, and it will be very, very important moving forward to understand whether there are limits to the medications that are available to patients that could be problematic. Now, why might they be problematic? There is a concept called heterogeneity of treatment effect or variability of treatment effect. Why is it that one patient might respond to a certain antidepressant but not to another antidepressant, and another patient responds to the first one but not to the second one? In circumstances like that, you would want to make sure that the doctor has various options for treating patients. So it will be very important as we see the state's exchanges unfold that there not be restrictions of choice in areas which are critical to patients. So that's the first thing we need to keep an eye on. One of the second issues to keep an eye on is the financial responsibility for patients. Now, the Affordable Care Act has in its legislation a certain maximum about how much out-of-pocket spending would be required of a patient over the course of a year. Now, this won't vary from state to state. This is a regulation that has now been determined by CMS. But it's a fairly large number. It's thousands of dollars. And unfortunately, it will probably apply not only to MRI scans or surgical procedures that may be somewhat elective. That same out-of-pocket maximum may apply to medications. And some of those medications, many of those medications, may be preventative. It may be keeping key risk factors under control, like elevated blood pressure or high cholesterol levels. And it's not clear whether a certain number of patients will find that those out-of-pocket maximums are very onerous for them and that they limit the number of medications that are being used. Now, there is a possibility, however, that when you design your exchanges and the insurance plans within those exchanges, you'll be very wise in how you set up the deductibles that patients might experience, so that certain medications, the very valuable preventable medications, things that are not really elective, have very low copayments, and there might not be large deductibles that they have to meet. Very importantly also are the specialty medications. These are often quite expensive, and typically health plans might say, well, it's not a $10 copayment or a $30 copayment. We're going to ask you to pay 20% of the cost, which could be, the drug could be $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 a month, which 20% is still a sizable amount of money. And if they have to reach that out-of-pocket maximum before the insurance will fully pay for it, patients might find that after a month or two, they can't afford it anymore. So these are some of the issues that need to be carefully examined. If they are carefully done, then the health exchanges could be a really wonderful vehicle for making sure that patients have insurance coverage and that it is carefully taking care of their greatest needs.